Into the Fold is a podcast on mental health issues, produced by the Hogg Foundation for Mental Health. I'm your host, Ike Evans.
So the Texas Cooperative Youth Study was a study conducted principally by the Hogg Foundation, along with the Texas Education Agency's Homemaking Education Division. And it was also sponsored by about 16 state institutions, specifically their home economics departments. And one of those primarily was UT Austin, where two of the principal researchers were based. These were also Hogg Foundation staffers, Dr. Bernice Milburn Moore and Dr. Wayne Holtzman. And so in 1954, essentially they were looking to study the attitudes of youth and high schoolers all over Texas. They conducted a representative sample with 13,000 students from all over, of different class backgrounds, different racial backgrounds, and different religious backgrounds. Pretty much every sort of community in Texas, from very small rural towns, farming communities, all the way up to, the large metro areas. And so the idea behind the study was essentially, as I said, to allow youth, in their own words, to kind of explain their attitudes about a lot of different topics, including their family and home lives, social issues at the time, and, what they thought of school, what they thought about their future prospects, all sorts of topics like that, at the time, they weren't really hearing a lot from students, by students on those issues. And so they were looking to study students' attitudes broadly, but especially about segregation and desegregation at this time. Obviously, a national debate was kind of happening in the background. 1954, as we know, was the year of the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court case. So I think that was a big undercurrent that was influencing why, folks felt compelled to study not just kids' attitudes broadly, but specifically around social issues, around things like segregation in schools. As far as we know, at the Hogg Foundation at least, I can say it was certainly not anticipated, at least with this level of vitriol and this strongly. I think a lot of the historical documents give us the perception that the Hogg kind of saw this as any other, grant that they funded and project that they would take on. They were doing a lot of research at the time into all sorts of different sociological issues, as well as just other, relevant social issues at the time. And so this wasn't seen as exceptional, at least in the literature that we have. And then once it caused this stir, as I mentioned, with legislators, concerned parents, conservative commentators on television, in Houston, it really caused a big stir, which we can get into in a second. But essentially, this forced the Hogg Foundation to realize that there were real-world impacts and there were real-world responses to a lot of the research that was happening, maybe in a more academic or research environment. It wasn't necessarily being received as just that. It was really tied to a lot of political issues at the time. And so after this, there was a public outcry that caused Ima Hogg, who was, benefactor of the Hogg Foundation, to reverse her position on how the foundation conducted research. She claimed, the study should not have been given to children. And Dr. Sutherland, who was the executive director of the foundation at the time, saw any kind of social science study or activity was just getting this sort of response. The moment he claimed that there were a lot of conservative groups that saw this as an invasion of privacy and tied it to, implanting communistic ideals in youth.
The fact that there was a negative reaction to these studies shouldn't shock anyone. And because this is in the midst of a period of great turmoil in American American society. We had just come out of World War II, and the American people really was where they were looking at a very peaceful, non-war setting. The boys were home from the war and all this, and they were looking for the sort of nirvana of America, that's just peace and what we characterize the 1950s for white people. And all of this stuff, just part of this, there was also a reaction that's rooted in really deeply in American culture, and that's anti-government. And the anti-government movement is at the heart of the Red Scare and McCarthyism of the period. We have to realize that the first decade after World War II was characterized by this anti-communist hysteria. And when I say anti-communist, I don't mean some sort of intellectual anti-communism. I'm talking about just basically a seeing reds under every bed kind of hysteria kind of thing that really didn't even exist. It was a go. And so when this report came out, it was running smack dab into the middle of this whole stew pot of anti-government, anti-intellectualism, and racism, which all three have deep, deep roots in American history.